Well, dear friends, thank you for joining us this evening. Today, in our first chamber series, we will cover the topic of this very mysterious character that we have been hearing for so many years in so many lectures thus far. And this is the Kalki Avatara of the new age of Aquarius, Samael Aung Weor. In this lecture, we will cover in broad detail some aspects of his previous lives, and we have condensed all of that particular information into a single lecture, just to give you a feel and a better understanding for what is not only the role of this Buddha Maitreya, but also on the work and the sacrifices that he endured as he methodically worked in the incarnation of that solar logos of Mars, which is the Archangel Samael. So, as we start with this lecture, let's start by saying that Samael Aung Weor is not a pseudonym. A pseudonym is a false name. Certainly, a pseudonym has for definition false name, and his name, Samael Aumveor, is not a pseudonym. When it comes to people like you and I, we all were given a name at the time that we were born. With that name, many of us were baptized, and many of us were certainly not. And as we have gone through our lives, that name has been present throughout all of the myriad of experiences, sentiments, and emotions and difficulties that we may have possibly experienced. And we have come to identify with that name that we have received. For us, the name that we have been given is the name of our personality. But one thing is the name of the personality, and another thing is the name of the innermost. That name of the innermost is eternal. It is authentic, and it is certainly secret. Anyone can find out, can learn about the name of their innermost. But for you to be able to know the true name of your innermost, there is an internal transformation that must happen. The way to know our true name, the name of our Atman, of our being, is through the incarnation of the being itself. So when it comes to the name Samael Aung Veor, Samael is the name of that archangel who is the fifth archangel of the seven cosmo creators. Samael means the justice of God. Just like you learned earlier, that the name Gabriel, El is always a Hebrew termination that means God. Gabri, it means the hero of God. Raphael means the wisdom of God. Michael means whom, like God. Zachariel means the great man protecting the well of wisdom of God. You see? These are very simple names, but they carry a very complex and profound meaning behind them. And Samael means the justice of God. And that second part of his name, Aun Veor, means the word of God. So, as an avatar, meaning a messenger, as a bodhisattva, meaning an incarnated human soul of a being, Samael Aung Veor is the soul of that which is the justice of God that comes to deliver the Word of God. And the Word of God that He comes to deliver is in parts, it is fragmented. Because every time that there has been a humanity, there has been a truth that has been revealed to that particular humanity. You would remember that from our previous lectures, every cosmo creator, meaning every genie of a planet, is responsible for delivering seven races within their own organism, within their own planet. And for every one of their seven races, there would be one of these cosmo creators, one of these archangels, to deliver a specific truth. So to the beings in the first race, they received the first truth, and the beings in the second race, they received the second truth, and so on and so forth. And here we are, the fifth great race, which is the Aryan race, that is encompassing of all of us in the planet. We had the opportunity of receiving the unveiling of the fifth truth. And that is that word of God that the justice of God sends to us. This wisdom of gnosis unveiled to us is that fifth truth that is revealed to this humanity. Samael tells us, relevant to his name, if I had to stand before a firing squad for saying who I am, I would be courageously do so. I would be courageous enough to do so. This is not a pseudonym. My real being is truly the regent monad of the planet Mars. This is what Samael tells us. And when it comes to those seven truths, we would like to share with you what these seven truths are. These seven truths are outlined in the book, The Major Mysteries. And the first truth has to do with the knowledge of the miseries and pains of this world. This particular truth was delivered by Archangel Gabriel to the very first race. That first race was the polar race. The second root race, the Hyperborean race, received the unveiling of the second truth, which is the knowledge of human fragility. The third race, or the Lemurian race, came to receive the wisdom of the third truth, that is the knowledge of desire and sin. The fourth root race, which is the Atlantean race, they came to receive the unveiling of that wisdom of the knowledge of the human mind. For us, here in this fifth race, we have come to receive the unveiling of Gnosis as the tree of knowledge. And in this wisdom of the tree of knowledge is where Samael unveils for us that ancient mystery of in miso membrum virilis in vagina femina sine ejaculatio dolens seminis. It is there the key for us to conquer not only all of our fears, all of our insecurities, all of our indiscretions, but to establish the necessary dominion over our own psychological aggregates by working directly through the efforts of observing and comprehending them and eliminate them with the intervention of our Divine Mother. Samael comes to unveil for us the great mystery of the super dynamics of love, and that is the wisdom of the tree of knowledge. In the sixth root race, Archangel Zachariel will come and will unveil that mystery behind the human consciousness. And then Archangel Orifiel in the seventh root race, that one which some authors believe that will be referred to as the Lilliput race, because they're expected to be of a very small size. Well, they will receive then the wisdom of the tree of life. But Samael, being the fifth one of the seven, he is the one responsible for unveiling that wisdom behind the tree of knowledge. Samael on Weor, dear friends, is our Kalki avatar. And these words are Sanskrit in nature, and perhaps that is why it is a little complicated for the mind to be able to understand what they mean. Kalki means end of times, and avatar means messenger. So when we hear Kalki avatar, it means that Samael Veor is the messenger that comes to deliver that mystery at the end of times. But there's one thing that happens. There are many people who speak in terms of gnosis as if gnosis belonged to Samael. So people will speak in terms of the gnosis of Samael, they will speak in terms of the gnosis of this other person, the gnosis of this other master, as if we were speaking different things. Well, allow us to tell you that what the legends tell us is that when men fell, and when men were expelled from the Garden of Eden, The great masters gathered the wisdom and tore it apart and tossed it into the four winds so that it would become scattered all over the earth. This, of course, is an allegory. This, of course, is symbolic. What that is saying is that we can find the true wisdom of gnosis behind every corner. We can find the essence of gnosis in the simplest of our daily experiences in life. So, in reality, this is not implying that Samael owns gnosis. Certainly not. Gnosis is the root wisdom of all of the world's great religions. Samael only comes to aggregate and consolidate the very best of all of the wisdom. Because in Gnosis, we find the very best of Zen Buddhism. In Gnosis, we find the very best of yogi practices, whether it is Raja Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Agni Yoga, Kundalini Yoga. We find here the very best. It is here in Gnosis where we find the very best of the wisdom of the Aztecs, the very best of the wisdom of the Mayas. And he does it in such a way that he ties it all together so that we can put this wisdom into practice at these times where we are running literally out of time to be able to perform and manifest a true internal transformation. Samael tells us, he who delivers a message, and it has been my turn to deliver such message by decree of the White Lodge, I am referred to as a messenger in Sanskrit avatar, the one who delivers the message, a servant of the great work of the Father. Let's not allow this to become confusing. So he is very adamant, letting all of his students, all of the readers of his books to know, don't follow me. This is what he says. Don't follow me. He says, follow the guidance of your innermost. He says, I am here just to deliver the message. I am here to go through this particular experience so that I can draw the map for you. So that you can take this map and that you can start walking it, this map of Gnosis, and through your life experience, you can decide if this is something that you want to do or not. But he is very clear stating, don't follow me. And this is the same thing that we do. We take the words of Master Samael, and for those of us who are sharing this wisdom with you, we say the same thing. Please don't identify with us. We are living in as much suffering as you are. We have been so lucky that we have been given the opportunity to be able to learn of this so that we can share it with you, so that you can, by your own experience, pass it forward. So that you can pass it forward to others by virtue of the quality of your own actions. And we say this because of proximity. Well, some of us are closer to you than other instructors, and you end up seeing us more than seeing others. And after a while, we start creating relationships and developing linkages of trust that tend to confuse the ego. And we certainly would not like to see you making the mistake of thinking that we are superior or that we are more trustworthy, or because we carry a lot of defects within. So Samael says, don't follow me. He says, follow the direction of your own innermost. And Samael, as an avatar, as a messenger, he tells us, I am the avatar, whether humans believe it or not. We are here delivering this message to see the preparation of the great army of global salvation so that we can face the terrible events that are upon us. It is not until then when we will know who's who. That is all. So this is what Samael says. Says it really does not matter if you believe that I am the messenger or not. I am here to do this job. I am here working as a servant of the White Lodge, and I am here to give you this wisdom on the tree of knowledge. He is saying we are doing this because we are doing our very best effort to prepare the great army of global salvation. You will remember what the great army of global salvation is because we spoke of it when we were delivering our lecture about the mission of the extraterrestrials. You remember that as we were addressing that lecture, what we shared with you, the key takeaway from that lecture is these other great beings that exist in other planets, in neighboring solar systems, in neighboring galaxies throughout the universe. Their purpose in their advancement is to work with those humanities that are less developed than them so that when those people receive the unveiling of their wisdom, as they are working in their internal transformation, those who are capable of eliminating at least 50% of their ego become then the right candidates to be removed from that planet and be taken into a location where they can remain safe while the planet is undergoing all of its changes. Changes like the changes that are induced here by the electromagnetic forces of that great colossus, which is the planet Hercolubus, a planet that completes its orbit every 24,946 years, together with its fractions of centuries and decades and years and months and days and hours and minutes. So all of those changes that will happen to the geology of the planet, to the arrangement of the planet as it is today, will definitely be catastrophic for those who cannot escape them. And those people who are then able to eliminate at least half of their psychological aggregates, they become then the right candidates to be taken away and taken to a safe location while the planet is undergoing its changes. And they are taken into a safe haven so that they can continue working in their internal transformation, that they can continue working with their three factors of the revolution of the consciousness, so that they can keep working in the awakening of their consciousness and incarnate their being, because those will be the ones who will serve as a seed for the next great race. This is why Samael says, it is not until then when we will know who's who. It is at that time when all those who are then spared from the catastrophe, we will know who those are. And of course, everybody will know about the validity of all of this wisdom and all of these words that Samael has left for us. Because this is wisdom that has existed even since before the arrival of this fifth race, the great master, the Manu Vaivasvata, that we tend to know in general as Noah, the builder of that ark. He was the avatar of that fourth root race of the Atlanteans. He is the one who delivered that wisdom. He was the one who was there to help spare some people from the catastrophe. So you see, back then, they had this very same wisdom, just like in the times of Lemuria, and just like in the times of the Hyperboreans, and just like at the times of the polar race. The wisdom has always been the same. What has truly changed is the way in which we have complicated our lives and all events with our own psyche. Friends, Samael Aung Weor is a Buddha Maitreya. The great Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, the man who received the illumination under the Bodhi tree. Bodhi, illumination. So the man who was illuminated under the tree of illumination, that tree of illumination being the tree of life, being the tree of knowledge. He said, in around 2500 years, the Buddha Maitreya will arrive. A Buddha Maitreya is a Buddha of compassion. These are illuminated men who follow the vertical path. These are men who go through the most difficult of adversities. They go through the harshest conditions in their development to be able to incarnate the innermost, in their effort to be able to fuse themselves with their real being, to into break past the 11th door into the realms of the unmanifested light. This man who received that illumination under that tree, he stated in around 2500 years, the Buddha Maitreya will arrive. Those Buddha Maitreyas, as you've already heard me say, they go through the harshest of lives and the harshest of sacrifices to be able to fuse themselves not only with their real being, but to go beyond that 11th door into the realm of the unmanifested light, into the realm of the absolute abstract space. And Buddhas Maitreyas are Buddhas of compassion. This is what the great Buddha told his disciples. And allow us just to do some very simplistic math. Because Siddhartha Gautama abandoned his body around the year 544 before the era of Christ. The new era of Aquarius started in the year 1962. This is when the planets in our solar system all converge together within the same sector and relevant to the position of the Earth. We were under the constellation of Aquarius, and we were facing directly the constellation of Leo, the lion of the law, implying that humanity is already mature enough to receive its karma. That is what opens up the era of Aquarius. This is that event, that planetary event that gives and calls for the beginning of this particular era. And between the year 1962 and the year of the disincarnation of the Buddha in the year 544, 545 before the era of Christ, there are exactly 2,506 years. So the great master, Siddhartha Gautama, announced the arrival of the Buddha Maitreya. The great Buddha announced the arrival of the Buddha of compassion. Now, why is it that Samael is also referred to as a Buddha? Well, as we go through our probationary path, as we walk into those initiations of major mysteries, after completing many other trials and tribulations, the test of justice, the tests of Dairini, the tests of the four elements, as we go through the tests of the guardian of the thresholds and many others, by the time that we complete successfully the development of the mental body, that one which is of a solar nature, by the time that the Divine Mother decides to crown that master at that moment of achievement, after working tirelessly for many lives, working with the elimination of those psychological aggregates that he created, she crowns him and she says, this is a new Buddha. This is a new illuminated one. Our real Buddha is the innermost. Our innermost is the source of all of our light. And when the innermost achieves self-realization, it is declared a Buddha. That's what happens. When the innermost achieves self-realization and it is working its consciousness to the point that it achieves mastery within the mental plane, the Divine Mother crowns it a Buddha, and the next work that they do in the causal plane results in them receiving the incarnation of the Christ in that Venustic initiation. So when the innermost achieves self-realization, it is declared a Buddha. And this is why it is a Buddha Maitreya. It is an innermost that achieves self-realization and is doing work because of compassion. This is why it's called a Buddha of compassion. So Maitreya, because now we have to expand our understanding of this. We cannot allow our mind just to go into a tunnel vision and just simplify things too much. Maitreya is both individual, meaning that master, and Maitreya is also a collectiveness. It is also an initiate who has become Christified. So Yeshua ben Pandira, Quetzalcoatl, Krishna, Hermes Trismegistus, Samael, that have received that Christ. They are certainly Buddhas Maitreyas. This is what it means to us. But let's go into the topic of the previous lives of Samael. Samael took around 1 million years to achieve his mastery. And we know for a fact that that may come as a little shocking to many people. Because for sure, you have seen Samael state that when it's well worked, we could achieve, awakening of the consciousness, perhaps self-realization in a single life. That requires an exceptional amount of work. And our humanity today is just too weak. There are many people who have the very best of intentions, but in reality, when it comes to the time of action, they're fairly inactive. That is what happens to many of us. So for Master Samael Weor, it took around 1 million years for him to achieve mastery. And in the big scheme of things, 1 million years in the life of the universe is nothing. 1 million years from the perspective of a day of Brahma is certainly the blink of an eye. So it may appear as a long time, but it is only because of our own perspective from here, from this organic smear of layer, from this smear of organic material that exists as the outermost layer of this planet. As we start working intensely in our own selves, there is an opportunity to experience not only the mysteries of life and death, but also the greatness of the universe. There is so much to explore. There is so much to experience. There is so much transformation that must be achieved that 1 million years is just nothing. And if we dedicate every instance of our lives just to live these three factors of the revolution of the consciousness, where we can work to eliminate and allow for the birth of virtues and faculties and powers and bodies and laws, all of these things that constitute that solar soul that we're seeking, and we work in sacrifice for others, then it is certainly time well spent. In our second chamber, we offer a seminar of around 20 lectures where we study the past lives of Samael Weor. And it is a very long seminar. 20 seminars means that we will share them with our second chamber students in a period of around 20 weeks. That's around 4 months. But we do that because Samael tells us, I would like to assure that within the life of each initiate, we find the drama of initiation. That means that within the life of every initiate, we will find suffering. We will find great work and sacrifice for others. We will find betrayal. We will find that they are abused by their friends, by their relatives, by their humanity. That their enemies do the worst possible to them. And that they also always emerge triumphant. Samael also says the life of each initiate relates to symbolic figures, and it is only between initiates that we can understand each other. So as we go through something like this 20-part seminar, many of us will be able to get something different from the very same life experience of Samael. Just like in the same way, every time you grab one of his books and you read it again, you end up getting more information, more wisdom, more details of that which is applicable to your life. And that happens because our level of being changes. But that also happens because we get out of this exactly what we bring into. If we continue receiving this deep wisdom of gnosis and we keep living life with our old ways of thinking, always thinking that things are jokes, always making use of our mind to speak with hidden meanings and sexual innuendos. Well, that's exactly what we're going to get out of Gnosis. Nothing. If we bring into this the fire of that longing, if we bring into this the love for the work itself, then Gnosis will certainly transform us. Friends, in the previous cosmic day, in the previous Mahamambantara, way before life emerged on the moon, Samael was already working. Because Samael, as a cosmo creator, he is one of the seven who brings order into this realm of creation. Mahamambantara is a very, is a word that denotes what is a day of Brahma. And the day of Brahma, if we were to quantify it in what are our current day years here on Earth, it would be something close to 311 trillion 40 billion years. This universe, as it stands today, our scientists can only estimate that the age of the universe as we know it is 13.6 billion years. And yet, a day of Brahma is 311 trillion 40 billion years. That is certainly a long time. But what is important here is not the duration of the Mahamambantara, because the Mahamambantara has its counterpart, which is the Pralaya. Just like there is a cosmic day, there is also a cosmic night. What is important here is that the universe expresses itself in cycles of activity and cycles of resting. The principle of correspondence that was given to us by the great Hermes Trismegistus is of tremendous value for us to be able to comprehend the greatness of all these things that our senses are unable to perceive or to even interpret. As above, so below. So just like here in the below, we can see that cycles of action go through periods of activity and periods of repose, periods of inactivity. The same thing happens in the manifestation of the universe. But relevant to Master Samael Weor, in the previous cosmic day, as a simple human, he was not interested in the great work. And that is important that we know it. Because you would see, as you look into your own life experience, that there are times that you find yourself very active working in all things Gnosis. And you will read books, and you will listen to lectures, and you will do your mantras, and you will practice your runes, and you will partake with your spouse for those who apply, and you will go into the practice of the super dynamic of love, and you will work in the transmutation of your creative energies, etc., etc. And there are periods that you're not interested. This happens because our innermost, our individual and particular Father who is in secret, will work the consciousness. For some, the innermost is working that consciousness very actively. And for many lives, or for one life, that person, as it is here on this earth, is constantly doing the necessary work of Gnosis. There are others that have their innermosts working them intermittently. So they will go through periods of activity and periods of pause. And yet there are others whose innermost is not interested at all in self-realization. So the projection of that consciousness of that innermost is here. It is trapped within psychological aggregates, but these are people that are very simple. They are not interested in the great work. They are not interested in an internal transformation. All they want to do is go to work and go home. All they want to do is just do whatever they do. And there is a very profound teaching there for us, because that teaching is saying we cannot be forcing gnosis on others. There are many instances where husbands become desperate because their wives are not interested in gnosis. And they try to force gnosis on their wife. Just like there are many wives who have husbands that do not care about this, and they try to force gnosis on their husbands. That is the worst that anybody can do. Because if you force it and they start creating resistance, then they're going to be less interested. Then rather than being uninterested, they will grow an aversion to the wisdom. And that is worse because you are at cause behind that. So you see, there are some that are receiving that fire of longing from the innermost and they are working diligently every minute of the day. There are others who work intermittently and they will work for months at a time and they will go for years without even working. And then there are others who will never work because their innermost is not interested. And this is something similar to what happened to Master Samael on Weor in the previous cosmic day. In his last body, in that last cosmic day, he held the body of a woman. And not being interested in the great work, he abused of that body and he certainly abused of his sexuality. So he fell into adultery. And once his last life came around, well, he inevitably penetrated into the spheres of hell. The narration that he shares with us about his experience in the spheres of hell is horrible. He speaks of all of his suffering. He speaks of his own disintegration. He speaks of how his own aggregates, even deep within the spheres of hell, continued to do all the wrong things that they were doing while they were walking out in the surface. So as he completed that cycle and he emerged as a clean and pure consciousness at the other side of hell, he had to go once again over the process of the transmigration of his soul. He once again had to walk in through the doors of the mineral kingdom, achieve mastery in the mineral kingdom to then transition into the plant kingdom, reach mastery in the plant kingdom and then transition into the animal kingdom and go through many different animal forms just like you and I did. Until at one point, his divine mother crowned him and gave him then a new physical body to start working all over again. Once he received his physical body, he met his teacher and he lived in very poor conditions because as a great master, as the as the projection of the human soul of a cosmo creator, because he did not take advantage of that opportunity, he was then sent to live in very poor conditions by decree of those great masters of karma. And then he started working very intently, very diligently. It is then what led him into the lunar chain. The lunar chain is another name for the 7 races of the moon. What we see today as the moon is nothing but the corpse of a previous planet. That is what is the moon today. And our planet, by the time that it delivers its 7 races, well, it will also perish. And eventually our planet will become a moon by itself. But the lunar chain refers to those 7 races of the moon. At the time of the 5th race, that humanity that was called the Selenites, I believe, Samael was delivering gnosis to that 5th race. And just like the great master Jesus went through that drama of the crucifixion, so Samael went through the drama of the crucifixion with the people of the 5th race of the moon. He was crucified and he suffered in what was made of a very bloody practice. And eventually, the cosmic day ended. Part of the anima of the moon was transplanted onto the earth, and life propelled up into the superior realms of creation. Because at the end of every cosmic day, when the time of rest or the pralaya arrives, all of those souls, all of those consciousnesses, essences, they return back into the bosom of the Absolute. And when the new cosmic day arises, the legends tell us that all of those essences cry because they have to leave that realm of absolute freedom, of absolute happiness, that realm of the unmanifested light, of the unmanifested abstract space that is governed by only one single law. And because they must abandon it to return into the period of activity, they suffer the unmentionable. So the new cosmic day arrived. And with the new cosmic day, that archangel became the regent or the genie or the soul of Mars. Archangel Samael is one of the seven cosmo creators. And you know these seven cosmo creators because you know of the 7 days of the week. Gabriel, Raphael, Michael, Samael, Zachariel, Orifiel. We're missing one. And of course, Archangel Uriel, the regent of Venus. So you see, seven archangels. And as an archangel, he sends his human soul from the very dawn of creation. So that human soul of this archangel, it was present at the time of the polar race. And the polar race went through its whole cycle and its four epochs of gold and silver and copper and iron. And then those who were able and capable of escaping, they certainly escaped of the changes that were manifesting in the planet at that time. Because you see, at the very beginning on these races, matter was completely different than what we know today. There was a point in all of these transitions where plants, many of them had animal attributes, and many animals had plant-like attributes. And this, of course, should not take you by surprise, because even to this day, we see many organisms of the animal kingdom that look like plants. Just like we see many organisms of the animal kingdom that have attributes of plants as well. As the human soul projected of this archangel, he was present at the time of the Hyperborean race, and then he had his physical body during the third root race, which was the Lemurian race. It was in the third subrace of the Lemurian race where humanity saw their sexuality split. Because before then, all these beings were androgens. Each particular body carried both the masculine and the feminine sexualities. But at a point, the sexualities were split, and beings were then being sent to work together in the great work. And it was at that time where he ate of the forbidden fruit. It was at that time where he became a fallen angel. But even after he fell, he worked very diligently with a lot of tenacity during the time of Lemuria, and once again he was able to rise and develop an immortal Lemurian body. He was present also during the times of Atlantis. He was the one who led the pilgrimages from the lands of Gravonchi to the lands of Mexico. And he partook of that great work for humanity, and he collaborated and worked with the great Manu Vaivasvata, Noah. And he helped plant the seed of this fifth Aryan race. This is what Samael did. Here, once we are in this fifth Aryan race, Samael became a Lama in Tibet. And even though he reached the degree of Lama in Tibet, with the challenges and the difficulties that are presented to us humans here as we continue degenerating, he once again ate of the forbidden fruit. And he once again fell. And he was expelled from the sacred order. Acknowledging and recognizing his mistake. You see? The one way that we can always initiate our transformation is by recognizing, acknowledging, and correcting our mistakes. And this is what he did. So he made progress once again in that first sub-race of this fifth Aryan race. And as he started making progress, he made the mistake of using of his spiritual powers to help a queen save her husband. He took on some money to influence some free will. He acknowledges that he shouldn't have done that. And that is a teaching that is implied right there for us. Because many of us, as we start making progress in these studies, as we learn about how to work with elementals, and we learn about elemental magic, and we learn about fundamentals of theurgy, and we learn to work with the stars, and we are learning to do all these things, we learn this, but we are still carrying the ego. We're still carrying our fears and our defects and our insecurities and our attachments. And then we see that we have a family member who becomes ill. And we immediately want to go grab things and do a maceration or a decoction and just give it to them so that they can be healed and that they can stay alive, and we want to save them. That is very noble. But when we do these things without invoking of the presence and the participation of our innermost, when we are doing things not in accordance with the decree of the great law, we're interfering and we are creating resistance into the work of the archons of karma that are way superior than what we are. And then that turns out to be black magic. You see? So he made the mistake of using his spiritual powers to help a queen save her husband. In the second subrace of this fifth Aryan race, he was incarnated as Chao Li. There, learning Zen Buddhism, he gives us today two great teachings, one of them known, of course, as meditation, which is a very ancient practice. Samael gives us the details and the specifics on how to do meditation. But he also gives us the second jewel of the golden dragon. He teaches us how to dominate the mind. He teaches us how to subjugate the mind. And then, in the third subrace, he was born in the lands of Egypt. It was there where he was able to complete his first mountain. That means that in those lands of Egypt, he was able to raise his 7 serpents of fire. As he did that, of course, he was able to achieve dominion over the elements of nature. He became a king of nature, and he safeguarded his body in a state of catalepsy. That means that it is a state where the functions of the system become almost zero. So there, he left behind a living mummy. As part of the third subrace in Egypt, he focused on healing people. So he used all of the wisdom that he had to help alleviate the suffering of others. And by the time the fourth subrace came to be, he was incarnated as Julius Caesar. And his responsibility was to establish the theater for the upcoming fifth subrace. At his time of Julius Caesar, he joined the Order of Generals, which was a degenerated group. And it was there where he was betrayed by Brutus. As you would recall from the story of Caesar, Brutus stabbed him in the back. And this one person who was Brutus at that time, he continued living recurrences with Samael for many other lives. And there's plenty to learn as we go in detail over his previous lives. At the time of the Middle Ages, he was incarnated in the person of Thomas of Kempis, and he wrote that book, The Imitation of the Christ. And during that time, his daughter was kidnapped by the Corsair of Austria. And he told them, look, liberate my daughter, and I will do my very best to save you from the hell that you've already walked into. and he delivered to his promise. Also, at those times in the Middle Ages, his sister, she fell in love with a peasant, and she became impregnated by that man. And to try to avoid her of suffering, he made the mistake of separating her from her child. And he brought not only immense suffering to herself and the child, but also he created consequences that that he had to deal with in subsequent lives. In his last three lives, he was also the Marquis Juan Conrado, the third great lord of the province of Granada. In Colombia, Mexico, he joined intimately with a woman of color. Back then, he claimed that he did that just as an experiment to see what would happen of a white man coming together with a woman of dark skin. And this is why the body that he had last still has traces of African descent. Because you see, we become children of our children. The great work that we do now helps our children, and as it helps strengthen our children, it becomes also a positive constructive condition by the time that we come back into a new womb on a future life. He was also incarnated in the person of Simeon Blailer. It is there where he experienced the karmas of Juan Conrado. And back then, as Simeon Blailer, he asked for the punishment of a man called Juan de Torquemada. This is at the times of the Inquisition. He went to see one of the inquisitors, and he went to complain about Juan de Torquemada because he was tired of being bullied and having to deal with all the harsh times and all the nonsense that Torquemada was giving him. But what happened is that he was asking for an admonition, and he learned that rather than an admonition, that man of the Inquisition decided that he was going to torture Torquemada. Samael said no, and he rebelled against that. As a consequence, he ended up facing other men in a duel, and being dominated by three other men, he ended up losing his life by being burnt at the stake in the Inquisition. And the last one, he lived the life of Daniel Coronado. Daniel Coronado was a soldier in the army, and one day, as they were holding formation, the captain beat him up, and in retaliation, Daniel retrieved of his bayonet and he stabbed him and killed him. Samael says, there is nothing more dangerous than a falling bodhisattva. Hmm? So Coronado, he escaped the law. And as he was hiding, one day, he came across a small store. And when he looked inside, he found Litelantes. And they were both suffering because they knew that they had to be working together. But she was married to another man. Later on, he, as Daniel Coronado, he was captured and he was jailed. But once he was released, he decided that he was going to help heal the indigenous people. And as he helped them heal their suffering, they fed him. And he created beautiful symbiotic relationships. He also participated in the revolution with Pancho Villa, and he died as an ill old man, and he witnessed his death. So this is what happened in those last three lives. Here in this last life, the one that we know of him, he was born as Victor Manuel Gomez Rodriguez, and he was born on March 6th of the year 1917. Notice how interesting is always the law of recurrence, because he was born in a neighborhood of Egypt, but this time in a neighborhood called Egypt in Bogota, Colombia. As he was a little child, we learn in his book, The Three Mountains, that as he shares his story, in his narration, he says, some time ago, the guardians of the Holy Sepulchre told me, we know you're leaving, yet before you leave, you must leave behind the maps that make up the path and your words. That's what happened. And being a master, as he is out there being ready to face those hurricane winds, instead of running to take shelter, he remained very calm. And he walked in to take shelter, and then he came to see the light as he emerged off the womb of his mother. He says that when he saw his father, he saw him as a very noble giant. And he also says that at the time that he was around 11 months of age, he already wanted to walk. He talks about his stories in which he approached an old window in the house, and he was very fortunate because the window was blocked. But his intent was to stand at the ledge of the window and just jump because he wanted to fly. He says that he used to sit in the lotus posture to meditate at the time when he was 5 or 6 years of age, and that he would spend hours in meditation. He says that he would look at the wall as it would illuminate with the rays of the sun, and in the reflection of the wall, he would be able to see vividly the images from his past lives. Samael tells us that at the age of 12, he was already very deep into the studies of spirituality. By the age of 16, he was very deep into the studies of theosophy, and by the age of 18, he was being led by Arnold Krumheller, Dr. Wiracocha, in the studies of Rosicrucianism. Yet, he continued to meditate, not only to integrate all of this wisdom, but to be able to tie all these things together. And because of all of that work, it is that today we have this work of gnosis. Some people say, but he died. He died in December 24th of 1977. Is he going to come back? Did he really die? We really have to help provide some clarification behind this, because relevant to his future physical body. He narrates in the book the mystery of the golden blossom, an experience that he had with his wife Litelantes as they visited the temples of the constellations of the zodiac. And he says that as his wife was looking at what she was going to select to incarnate in the next life, he found himself standing before the threshold of the constellation of Leo, getting ready to walk in and decide that he wanted to enjoy of the influences and the forces of that constellation for his next life. And all of a sudden he said, "Whoa, wait, what am I doing here?" He said, "I must await the order of my father, who has told me that through the remaining of this Mahamambantara, I'm not going to have another physical body." So you see, it is always the will of the innermost, not our own will. And that applies even for the masters. But he says about his wife, this woman adept, his wife Litelantes, she is making herself ready to complete a mission with a masculine physical body. Obviously, the constellation of Libra will be very favorable. And she was standing right there before the threshold of the constellation of Libra. He says this will be very favorable, more so because the work that he will be doing in the future life will be related to the realm of laws. In his book, At the Threshold of the Great Tragedy, Samael tells us, at the end of this, meaning at the end of these times, I will return to Shambhala. Many will think I would have disincarnated, but it would not be as such. I will remain absent while the yeast ferments. So as he abandoned his physical body on the 24th of December of the year 1977, he went back to Shambhala. He remains there with other great masters, and as he states, will remain absent while the yeast ferments. He says those who have received the Gnostic teachings need time to work upon themselves. Now you remember what we said about his Egyptian mummy. He says, after my death, my soul could reincorporate into that mummy if Tum, his innermost, so wished. This is what he tells us in his books and his writings, My Return to Tibet. the Christmas message of the year 1960 to the year 1970. And then we would like to address this as well because it is likely that you have noticed. Samael has an uncanny ability to influence the ideoplastic. In his book, The Process, written by his son, he speaks of the many beautiful experiences that he had with his father Samael. And his son says that in one Christmas Eve, he comes to visit his parents and he leaves his children with Samael in the living room as he is with his mother Literantes in the kitchen. And as he notices, he looks back because the children are very excited and they are very joyful and playful and making a lot of noise. And when he looks, there is a little donkey that is walking around the table, and the children are sitting on top of the donkey. And Samael just assumed a new, different shape with his body, and he was just entertaining the children, letting them have some fun. You see, that is one of the faculties of the influence of the ideoplastic. We see this also in many of the different pictures that were taken of Samael. Samael, in his physicality, it was very abused, certainly very beaten up. Samael walked from the lands of Colombia and South America all the way up to Mexico. And he speaks about his travels and he speaks about how cruel even construction has become, where houses don't even have enough roof extending out the side of the house to help shelter people who may be getting soaked in the cold rain. He speaks even about that level of suffering. But relevant to the influence of the ideoplastic, we have a little excerpt here from the Book of the Three Mountains when he says, "The adepts of the occult fraternity gave me a beautiful present when I abandoned that unusual and abysmal den. It is a minuscule instrument of magic with which with which I can operate as a theurgist by modifying plasticity. Those who have seen my photographs have evidence for themselves, the concrete fact that I control my plasticity voluntarily. The various forms of my face disconcert my best photographers. However, frankly and plainly speaking, I confess that it is not I who possesses this power, but my innermost, my real inner being, Atman, the ineffable one. He operates upon my plasticity when it is indispensable." And you will see, as you scan for pictures, dear friends, what you're seeing there is not photoshopped. These pictures predate Adobe Photoshop and any other photo imaging editing software by decades. But you will see that there are images in which he is there with his body as is, and he is also there in pictures like this one that you're seeing on the screen, where he, based on the narrations of some of his photographers, he would just rub his hand on his face from top to bottom, and his semblant will be transformed into a perfect complexion, just as you see in the screen. And of course, Samael, being a cosmo creator, being the great master that he is, he also enjoys of the faculty of ubiquity. That means omnipresence. That means everywhere. So in those times, as you're doing your work where you feel weak, where you feel defeated, it is perfectly acceptable for you to invoke the force and the strength of Samael as the logos of Mars. Mars, which is that celestial organism that has influence over law, action, and war. Just invoke of it. Invoke for that additional strength so that you can keep working upon yourself. Invoke so that you can get that additional boost of energy that sometimes we need to be able to face our adversities and make a change in our lives. And friends, here we would like to close with what Samael has left for us, because he says, "Know that I, Samael Aun Weor, am your avatar, your Buddha Maitreya. I have descended from the superior realms to teach you and help you. I am with you. Invoke me whenever you need it. It is no difficult work for you to concentrate on me and invoke me. You can invoke me mentally and I will respond to your call and help you intensely. I am willing to help. I would like to see you awakened and illuminated. Do you understand? I have not descended from the superior realms to waste time. I descended to help you, work with you, and serve you. I am your friend, a true brother who appreciates you with all his heart. It is imperative that you have faith in me. These teachings you have been receiving will be disseminated throughout all the earth. The time has come for you to go into the internal fight with these teachings. The time has come for you to worry about profoundly knowing thyself. Understood? You're not alone. You're not alone, I say again. I am with you in truth and spirit. Let the centuries listen and let the ages hear. I am with you in spirit and in all truth. I am very close to you. Every time you think of me, I am with you and will be with you, dear brothers, until the end of time. Continue the work. Move forward with courage, willpower, and tenacity. Dear friends, we have been able to source all of this information for you from the books of Samael and Weor, The Three Mountains, The Mystery of the Golden Blossom, The Power of Mantra, My Return to Tibet, The Doctrine of the Avatar of Aquarius, the book The Major Mysteries, the Esoteric Treatise on Rune Magic, and the lecture Samael and Weor is not a pseudonym. And of course, we are certainly grateful to all the many different sources out of which we were able to extract some pictures to put these materials together for you. So, dear friends, this is what we wanted to share with you this evening. Thank you so much for joining us, and may all beings be happy.